Hello and welcome to The Print. This is Akanksha Mishra, and today I'm here to discuss one of the biggest private sector space achievements that India has had today, which is the launch of Vikram-1 rocket by Skyroot Aerospace. To join me in this discussion, I have Mr. Ajey Lele, the Deputy Director General at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. I have Mr. Ashwin Prasad, who's a research analyst at Takshashila Institution, and I have Ms. Srimathy Kesan, who's the founder and CEO of Space Kidz India. Thank you so much for joining me today for this discussion. And let's dive right in. I think I'll start with Ms. Kesan. Ma'am, very simply, can you tell us what is the significance of what we saw today? We saw India's first private sector rocket launch. Tell us about it.
It is, I think, going to be etched in history. What a coincidence. This July 18th is plain. The start of our space missions, the SLV. On July 18th, and again here July 18th with private rocket going soaring high. I mean, it was just a treat to watch, and a new generation of mission control. The excitement, yeah, everything was, it was, there is so much of a shift, but that
Yeah.
shift is so beautiful because ISRO has been hand holding all of them and sharing their experiences. So it is like they were able to start from that point. So it was easy for them to develop with the latest technologies, 3D printing, motors, and the propulsion system and the thrusters. I mean, everything was so beautiful. I mean, wonderful, I have to tell. Of course, first time to get to the orbit,
Yeah.
soaring 430 kilometers is unbelievable, I have to tell you. So the
Yeah.
amount of effort that has gone behind this is a testimony of youth power of India. And
That
now
was
I
very
feel
well said.
so proud that India has got so many varieties of rockets now, which can carry satellites, say 350 kilograms, 500 kilograms. So you have Vikram-1, you have SSLV, PSLV, GSLV, LVM, you have everything.
Yeah.
So we are there now.
Yes.
So
Yes,
people
that was
just
very.
come, yes.
Thank you
So
so
this
much,
is
ma'am.
what is the significance I feel today.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that was very well said. And it also brings me to my next question. And Ashwin, this is for you. So, in general, what does this indicate globally? Because Skyroot also became, I think, one of the few space companies in the world that reached orbit on its first try. What does that mean?
This is definitely a huge milestone for India because this makes India the third country in the world after the US and China to have a private orbital launch vehicle that has succeeded and it is proven. Many countries have tried, Japan, South Korea, Germany, many countries have tried and they continue to try. But we have reached this milestone faster than most others in this space race around the world, and that is a big deal. And this is coming at a time where there is a global bottleneck for launches. SpaceX has basically a full book of launches for its ride sharing missions going all the way till 2028, 2029. And so there is actually this is right now the world is looking at a launch bottleneck, and India having yet another launch vehicle that can entertain customers and offer launch services is a major leg up. And it also comes at a time where we are domestically facing challenges with our own launch capabilities. The PSLV has had two consecutive launch failures. In 2026, we have had so far very few. We have basically not had launches from PSLV that have succeeded. And so this is coming at a time where we need a deeper bench as far as the launch capabilities go within the country, and so this is going to be a highly significant addition to that. And yeah, so it's a
That's
also a very powerful signal to the rest of the world that India is India's space sector is growing. It'll help with investments, it'll help with um, all of that. So yeah, it's a big deal globally, I would say.
That's
I
great.
can
Thank you.
just add one point to what he mentioned. Beautifully he narrated. There is also one other thing, that the bottleneck is not only for the launch manifestos, but it is also for the unrest around the world now. There is wars going on everywhere, and to even think about going to those places are a little scary now. So it's easy and comfortable to come to India, where we are so welcoming. The culture is so beautiful, because that's also very important for them when international travelers come to India. So it is a very, very important message that we are sending out to the world, that we Indians, a friendly country, welcoming all of you here. Come here. You just have your ideas. We design, we build, we launch, and we give you the data.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, Mr. Lele, what I wanted to ask you is that, as as Ashwin mentioned, every country wants a thriving commercial launch industry. But with Skyroot, and also looking at India's needs in general, its space needs, its defense needs, what makes India's need for a launch industry and its opportunities for a launch industry different from that of other countries, different from, for example, US or China?
You see, the strength of India's launch industry is in the cost factor. It is one of the most reliable launcher systems. PSLV unfortunately had two back to back failures. But leaving that aside, PSLV has been one of the most successful launch vehicles for all these years. So, PSLV has shown to the world that India is the most reliable partner as far as sending satellites to the space. At the same time, the cost factor is also very important. As far as developing a launch industry right now, if you see by 2013 2014, SpaceX actually started making inroads into the domain of a space. Otherwise, before that, hardly any satellites were launched. Maybe around say 500 plus satellites all over the world were launched. But all of a sudden now, thousands of satellites are there, and particularly they are there into a low Earth orbit. So India has found an opportunity that yes, low Earth orbit market is increasing day by day, and that's the reason India has started making these investments. These investments are not only from a private sector, because ISRO has already developed a launch vehicle called SSLV, which is again for the similar type of a launch systems into low Earth orbit around 500 kg satellites. Now they have transferred that technology to HAL, and HAL will be doing those commercial launches. Along with today's launch, you got another startup which is working on again developing a launcher system called Agnikul. It has got a agenda of launching say satellites around 150 kg satellites to around 700 kilometers of orbit. So people have understood that there is a good amount of a market which is emerging into launching satellites into low Earth orbit, and that's why I think India has got now, along with ISRO, a private partner also is there, the Skyroot. And mind you, Skyroot has become a unicorn, so it is one of the first space tech unicorn which is there. So good amount of a investment is also happening, because for any startup, what is most important is that they need to have a proper investment, so the investors confidence is going to get boosted up with the success of today's launch.
That's actually a very good point. And speaking of space startups, Ms. Kasan, you yourself have, you started Space Kids India, I think, one of India's oldest space tech startups. Now, when you look at Skyroot's journey yourself, what are some places where you can relate to them in how far they've come? But also, what are some unique challenges that you think Skyroot has had to face and overcome?
When you're the first in any of the industry, you have more challenges and backlashes. People will not understand. It is always that only governmental agencies can build a rocket or build a satellite. How can even people put up a satellite or rocket was always a question. When we started putting up a satellite, building satellite, they said, how can this happen? And when we launched the Kalam Sat first ever time in PSLV C-44, that is when rocket science was brought to the level of students. And every student started aspiring and started thinking that it is a multi-domain industry where everybody needs to come together. It is not a niche industry where somebody just comes like that, drops in, and just thinks of building a rocket or a satellite. It is not like that. It is a collaborative industry, and the challenges, funds are the challenges. So it is a huge investment, and every test runs into crores. So that is where it is, a terrible, and one small anomaly, the entire mission is doomed. So that is where people, literally think if they have to step into this industry, so that is, I'm very happy that they've pushed boldly into this and become a unicorn. To become a unicorn in the space industry is something, hats off and salutations to them, I have to tell you. So the trust that this industry is created is going to speak volumes for the next generation to get into this industry. So that is what Skyroot has paved way for.
That's perfect. But speaking of space startups, so ever since we've opened up space to the private sector, India has seen the rise of a lot of startups. I think we're close to 400 right now. But and Ashwin, this one's for you. Um, I think apart from Skyroot and as Mr. Lele mentioned, Agnikul, there's actually very few startups that are that are focusing on launch services. First of all, why do you think that is? And second of all, going forward, which startups in space do you think will be the most valuable for Indian ecosystem?
This is a feature, not a bug. The launch market, the size of the launch market in the space sector is smaller than, say, the size of the market in the downstream sectors of space, like space analytics, satellites, satellite data generation, like Earth observation, communication, all of that. So the number of launch companies you will have will always be dwarfed by the number of downstream companies that operate in the space sector in any country. But having said that, I still think two companies is a very small number for the ambitions we have and the potential we have. We actually have another third country that has not done any launches yet. But so basically, having two to three private companies in the launch domain is I would say a drawback that we need to fix. And the reason for this is pretty obvious. Every launch market, every space market around the world, there is a lot of domestic push that it needs to evolve, because all of this is seen from a sovereignty lens. We should have a sovereign launch capability, which is why every country intends to develop their own rather than relying on American or Chinese or any other rockets. And in every other country that has managed to develop a slightly deeper space launch ecosystem, they have done so by creating demand first. Europe has a policy of launching a large constellation of satellites that they will they are willing to pay for, and so that demand creates a lot of companies that come in and start setting up base and start building rockets for. The same thing with China. China announced two satellite internet mega constellations that number in the thousands, and now they have over 24 rocket making entities in the country, and half of those are trying to become reusable. So there is the demand sparks off the quest to fill that demand, and you then have a lot of companies. In India, that has been missing so far. We have not had a widespread policy where the government says, we want to launch a huge constellation of satellites and we are going to do it exclusively with Indian private rockets. So, build for us. If you succeed, we're going to give you a contract, and you have that assured customer anchor customer demand coming from the government that will allow the ecosystem to survive. And demand funding, the funders will come in, the whole ecosystem will then come from that demand signal, which we haven't had yet so far. I mean, we do have a EOPPP constellation coming up, which will use ISRO rockets as well. So having that exclusive agreement, exclusive proposal by the government for creating demand is right now what is missing, and that is the reason we have only two or three launch companies.
That's fair. That makes a lot of sense. And I have a follow up question to that in terms of why this demand hasn't risen. But I'll pose it to Mr. Lele, and I want you, sir, to look at it from a broader perspective of everything that's happened with Skyroot until now. Broadly, we all credit it to India opening up its space policy. the space policy of 2023 and everything that's happened since then. But if you were to look at what are some challenges that the space policy still has to overcome, or like the government still has to open up some more bottlenecks for the private space sector, which of those would you say are should be done in the future?
I think before answering that, just a small addition about the Indian companies getting into the launch business. You have a startup called Belentrix, which was trying to do it. They had identified a vehicle called Chetak around 2015 to 2017, but they have stopped going into that direction. As it was correctly pointed out, that downstream market has got more meaning. If you look at the entire gamut of the space business, the business as far as launching systems are concerned is not too humongous. So that is one of the reasons why many countries are not investing into it. And again, at the end of the day, actually having a launcher is what we call a rocket science. So definitely that's also is going to be a challenging. That is one end to it. And other thing, as far as challenges are concerned, I think challenges are far too many. But at the same time, if you see, there is good amount of a support which is now been there. As far as ISRO is also concerned, if you see in today's launch also, the law for the launch vehicle, you had a Sriharikota launch pad which was available. Your entire ground infrastructure, right, whether it's in Indonesia or in Australia, everything was available because of the support of ISRO. So there is a good amount of a hand holding which has started happening right now, and that is a good thing. The problems are going to be there. The problems related with technologies, the problems of technology transfer also are going to be there. Because even if the market has got opened up, there is a possibility of 100% FDI. Still, getting the major technologies, the niche technologies from NASA could become problematic at end of the day, because US has got certain export control policies, so on and so forth. So those problems will be there. The other thing is that if you see, as far as today's launch is concerned, it was noted that the average age of the scientific community in particularly Skyroot is hardly 28 years of age. So experience also makes a difference. So now you will have to have more experienced people working into these startups also, because one is that the youth brings a lot amount of enthusiasm, a lot amount of zeal, but at the same time you require people who have worked for years together on different types of systems also. So all these things come together is only going to make the industry move further, and I can say leapfrog. But it will take time. Let's not let's give them a certain amount of a time, because all over the world the launchers have been developed by taking almost 1 decade's time. Today, Skyroot has made it possible within at least almost 5 to 6 years of time only. So they are trying their level best, and I think they are at it in a very correct direction. And there is a good support which is happening from the various establishments which Government of India has identified after 2020.
That's very well said, sir. And now I'll move to Ms. Kesan because as Sir said while he was ending, that it Skyroot has done something in much less amount of time than other countries and other companies have taken to do it. What do you think worked in their favor? We at the print had the chance of visiting their facility a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned that the average age of their employees is 28. All of them, they have about more than 1,000 employees, which means that there's definitely a lot of interest and enthusiasm they've generated in people. But what are the things that they did right, and what are the things that work for them, according to you?
Okay, it's a great question. Now, you nurture a child, the entire country came together to nurture this child. I would say right from Honorable Prime Minister, he took that special interest. The Chief Minister of the state took that special interest. See, all this matters because there is so much licensing that we need to do, so much processing. And at the right time, in spaces inception happened, wherein, the processes were smoothened. It was like a single window. You go there, you give all the requests and everything. There are people to handhold you. And being the forefront runner, there is always that percentage of strength when everybody comes to you and when you are running the first race. And everybody is so excited to bring this as the first space launch vehicle, private launch vehicle. So I think that worked a real in their favor. That really worked in their favor. Challenges everybody has got. But the other thing is the age again. 28, the average age. Students just come out of college, and not many of them get married before that. So they don't have pressure from home. They just sit on the floor, they work. We see all these kids working around, because our team is also filled with only kids. Ours is like 14 to 19. So this is like, they they are out of the box thinkers, quick in solving issues and everything, and they work 24/7. And if you ask them that, they don't have that pressure, monetary pressure also from home. So this age group is a good age group, where not a lot of stress is imposed on them, so they can give their 100%. So all this worked for their success, I would say. And the technology and hand-holding the entire ISRO system for all the technology and everything, because again it's a solid propulsion. So it was completely hand-holded by ISRO. And you have Diana Gandhi sir, who's like got that tons of experience with him. So
Yeah.
everybody played their role. Challenge would have been only to convince a VC to get that funding, and to distribute the funds effectively, and how to put this and have it on track and on time. But otherwise, I think this child is, literally being brought up by several mothers.
That was very well put, actually. But moving on, when we talk about the future of, say, commercial launch industry in India, and Ashwin, I'd like you to weigh in on this. Um, for w- for a successful, or say a sustainable launch industry, what we need is for it to be commercially viable. And right now, a majority of that space globally is taken up by SpaceX. There's also Indian satellite companies that choose SpaceX over Indian launch because it's relatively cheaper. How do you think Skyroot will be able to tackle that?
The launch advantage that SpaceX has results from its reusability. So every time it launches a rocket, it is able to get that rocket back and reuse it a certain number of times. So essentially, they are saving the cost of engines, which is probably the costliest component in the rocket. And they are able to refuel, do some routine maintenance, routine checks, and reuse that rocket, which gives them the huge cost advantage. And now that their rockets are getting bigger and bigger, with Starship being the biggest rocket, they will be able to carry more payloads, and all of these will be ride sharing missions. So it's like, if I have to give an analogy, it's like many customers are taking the SpaceX train to space, right? So it's a train system. There is a specified time at which this train will leave the station, and everyone is getting ready to board and leave the train at that particular time. What Skyroot is positioning itself as is a responsive launch provider, which essentially means they are, if you as a customer are going to go to Skyroot and ask for their launch services, they will prioritize your timing. They are not going to make you wait for that scheduled time at which the train will leave the station, but rather they're going to give you an exclusive ride to the orbit that you desire in a shorter period of time. And all of their design and innovation and processes are designed around this system, where they want to quickly make the rocket and quickly set it up for launch, and quickly deliver the payload. And this has a very specific use case, which is largely rooted in the defense sector. When because like military satellites, when they need to be replaced for whatever reason, maybe a satellite went defunct, maybe it was attacked, maybe there was a cyber attack, for whatever reason, you would need a military satellite back in place, or an additional military satellite somewhere. You will want to be able to do it very quickly. And SpaceX has large rockets that carry many payloads. Skyroot, the Vikram-1 is a much smaller rocket, and they're going to be able to launch more quickly and more responsibly, and that is the component of this launch market that they are hoping to capture. And because these rockets are, essentially, you will, in a very commercial environment, when the relationships are good, and when the trade routes are open, you're going to have SpaceX as a cheaper and a more accessible launch option for many companies who want to save on money and not worry about when the payload is going to go up. But when the timelines become more sensitive, when you have when you have a contested environment around the world, and when you want to rely on your own domestic capability for all your space access purposes, I think having a domestic market is very, very useful. And it is good that we were placing a tremendous pressure on ISRO for this purpose, and now having a diverse launch market is going to be a huge advantage for India.
That's perfect. That was very well explained. I just have a couple of final questions, and any of you can weigh in on this. So the first is, what is next now for Skyroot? They achieved Vikram S was successful, Vikram-1 is successful. What would be the best possible path for them for commercialization? What do you think?
I think they will have to have one more launch or two more launches to declare the system operational. Because today's launch, one can call it as a test launch. So it will take time for them to ensure that the system becomes operational. And after that, they have been saying that they may undertake a launch once a month. So that's a very huge thing, because that sort of a turnaround time, if it becomes actually a reality, it will be a major boon. And as it was getting explained, that the concept of launch on demand, nobody in the world right now is having that sort of a I can say option available. Yes, there are companies which can do a quick turnaround time, but actually from a military perspective, launch on demand has not yet become a reality. And if Skyroot actually achieves that, then that will be a great thing for India's strategic requirements too.
Now, I was just thinking that, probably they need to do a little more of marketing, the way we were projecting ourselves. See, the thing is, like, we are dealing with 108 countries now, as you know about Mission Shakti Sat. When we interact with other countries, many of them are still unaware of our launches and everything. Everybody speaks only about SpaceX or China. So I think we are now at the right time where we can speak about our launches and market it in the right sense, where we can bring in more, customers to our country. And the ecosystem is built in a very robust manner now, because a conglomerate is formed to build a bus. A conglomerate is built for ground stations, which we were actually waiting and requesting for almost a decade. We've been talking about it, that we need, it's not competition here in India. We need the best brains to come to collaborate together and give that to the world. So initially, if we are able to do this, rather than competing amongst the startups, I think it's a huge business that we can attract into India. So this is what should be the next in line.
I just think that the whole world, there is a gold rush for the low Earth orbit. Unlike some of the other orbits like the geostationary orbit, where we can divvy up the orbit among the countries, and there is a more established system of global regulation. Low Earth orbit is like free for all, first come first serve kind of an environment, and there is a literal gold rush that every country is trying to take advantage of. Basically there is no limit on the number of satellites you can claim in the lower Earth orbit, number of orbital slots you can claim, the amount of orbital resources. So every country is optimizing for more launches. They want to have as many satellites as possible, smaller satellites, something that can be quickly built, quickly replaced, but just optimized for a lot of satellites. And to just like give you a perspective, SpaceX has launched more in a single year than India has launched ever, totally, all our launches put together. So there is a serious gap that we are trying to close here. And China has very recently demonstrated its own reusability with its own rockets, where they are catching rockets, and they're also going to operationalize reusable rockets. So we're going to see more launches from China as well. It is already pretty high, and it's going to only, they're going to try and close the gap with the US. So if we are also going to grab our slice of the pie, and only then do we actually get a global standing in the way space norms get designed, the way discussions around space governance are conducted. The only way is to grab our own slice. So the motto should be to increase launch cadence, take advantage of Skyroot's rapid launches, launch as much as we can, and the whole ecosystem is responsible for it, from satellite manufacturing to government contracts to the entire downstream sector, and creating that market itself. And yeah, I think that is a huge commercial opportunity that we ourselves have to take advantage of and optimize for.
That's great, Ashwin. You also actually answered my last question, which I was going to pose to all of you, which is what's next for India's space sector? If you can say in one or two sentences, what do you think we should be looking forward to the most? So, Ms. Kesan and Mr. Lele, I'll let you go first.
Mr. Lele.
Okay. As far as India's space sector is concerned, right now we are having a pie of almost 2% of the global market, and we have got ambition of reaching to around 8 to 10%. I think only launch market is not going to help you to reach to that level. So we have to look at other options also into the growing space sector, where commercial viability will be there, whether it is a downstream market, whether it is a ground infrastructure management, whether it is making of radars, so on and so forth.
Okay. Ms. Kesan?
Well, I would say it is the best time for India. I would repeat that, with the global unrest, we are there. So it is a forceful marketing strategy if we are able to undertake and bring in the customers here. Just come with an idea. We are here to design, build, launch, and give you the data. So the data sovereignty, if we are able to maintain, probably even critical satellites can be launched from our country, and we can give them those critical data. So I think we are at the right time in the country.
Ashwin, last words?
Last words I would say is space technology is a very dual use sector. A lot of the progress is driven by national security requirements, which will also have a lot of positive externalities in the other sectors of civilian governance and civilian economy. So I think what would help the sector a lot and is a sort of a demand projection by the government, where they say we need this in the next 5 years, we need that in the next 10 years, we need this in the long term in the next 15 years or 20 years. Having that predictable direction to signal demand, and then continuing to acquire these services from the private sector, and then ISRO itself will get freed up to focus on our more ambitious and the more like cutting edge missions, like putting Indians on the moon or building the Bharatiya Antariksh station, which is already underway. Having those, leaving those very high technology, milestone based achievements that will benefit the entire country to ISRO, while we chase the national security and the civilian and the economic goals by from the private industry, by incentivizing them to take up things that we would want to buy from them, and giving that consistent demand over a timeline is, I think, going to help the industry a lot and will make our efforts as an entire ecosystem a lot more focused.
That was perfect. I think between the three of you, you summed up the entire, bird's eye view of India's space ecosystem. And that's, I think, a great note for us to end our discussion on. I'm sure all of us wish Skyroot all the success and well in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today evening.